Hi, my name is Nicole Edelman, and I played at Front Range from 2010 to 2012. After that, I went to the University of Colorado at Boulder, and I sat there for 4 years. I most recently graduated in May of 2016, and I am going to Switzerland to start my professional career as a setter. My junior year, the summer before, or the summer between seasons, I had a pretty severe back injury that occurred while I was training, and it really just changed the whole path of my career. I had never been faced with a injury before. I had been hurt, but it was never a career-changing injury. After that, I had to really change my focus of how I was training. I still wanted to train intensely and often because I knew that's what I had to do to get better. However, I had to really change my emphasis to where I was working more on my core and just paying attention to what my body was doing in order to keep up the same training level and take care of my body.
When somebody goes through their traditional rehab program, be it post-op or post-injury, and they get to a point where they're completely pain-free in their lives, they're doing everything that they need to do outside of sport, there's a gap between that and actually return to play. And especially in high-level athletes, that's a huge gap. And most people will go just jump in and re-injure and then rehab again and then jump back in, re-injure and rehab. And for Nicole, we really didn't want that to happen. She wants to have a long career, and it's not just for her career, but it's also thinking in terms of her life after volleyball. We wanted her to be as good as she could be in order to play and in order to have a pain-free life. And so to bridge that gap, we pulled in Billy's work with Powercore 360 because it does help them to do sport-specific training. It also helps them to learn how to do rotational acceleration exercises, rotational deceleration, the things that you don't necessarily think about when you're a hitting athlete, or in Nicole's case, a setting athlete. And those were really important pieces for her to be able to return to play and not have a re-injury.
So I don't have a background in physical therapy. When you talk about the ability to accelerate and decelerate, what is that and why is that important?
So, for example, when you're hitting, you have to have fast and precise motion. That's the acceleration portion. It's not just the arm movement, it's also trunk control, it's also hip control and mobility. But then after you hit the ball, for example, your body has to then be able to decelerate, slow down, come back to neutral. And those are two things that do need to be retrained, and they don't necessarily take just the power muscles. They take the small stabilizing muscles that we're able to retrain with Powercore 360.
Talking back now, before Nicole got injured, what did you notice about the conditioning approach in Front Range that you found to be unique or helpful?
So we had been to another club before we came to Front Range, and also now from our perspective now, having watched how college programs work. A couple of things. Athletes will train the large muscles. It's gratifying. You see these, big quads and big deltoid muscles of the shoulders. It's gratifying. But if you don't have the small muscles, like the rotator cuff muscles that are underlying all that really help with the precision of the movement, if you don't have those muscles in good shape, you're going to be prone to tearing up your shoulder. Same thing with your back. If you've got, great rectus abdominis and obliques, but you don't have a strong transversus abdominis, which comes around your body like a corset and was one of the primary stabilizers of your spine, if that muscle isn't functioning well, you're going to be prone to back injury. And so at Front Range, we noticed that they take a more thoughtful and meaningful approach to training volleyball players. They train them to play volleyball, and which seems like a no-brainer, but unfortunately that's not the case. And so they work a lot on prevention. We know if you train proprioception, which is your body's ability to make small adjustments in your ankles, for example, if you train proprioception, we can hugely diminish the recurrence or the occurrence of ankle sprains. Same thing with your shoulders. If you train those small muscles for prevention, you can prevent shoulder injuries, and that's what Front Range emphasized, and that was very important for us in our decision for choosing a club.
So Nicole, you're going to put your feet and knees together, hands on your pelvis, and I just want you to take your pelvis, and it's tilted a little forward right now. I just want you to tilt it back to neutral. So that's forward, now tilt it back. Good. As you do that, you ought to feel your butt tighten up, your lower abs work, and I just want you to rep that. Let it relax, and then tip your pelvis back. So you're basically tucking your butt under.
And so Nicole tends to be pretty hyperlordotic. She has too much arch in her lumbar spine. And so this is an important exercise for her. Not only is she getting transversus to recruit, but she's also gaining lumbopelvic control so that she can control some of that hyperlordosis and hopefully be able to carry that over into playing.
So Nicole, in this next rep, I just want you to take it to neutral, and I want you to hold it and breathe. Maybe Nicole, tell us what you feel, what's working, what's stretching, what do you feel?
I definitely feel glutes working and my lower core here. I'm also just making sure that everything is tight and symmetrical as well as I'm going through it.
Again, more good transversus recruitment through here. She's getting some isometric control in the functional position that we want her to be able to maintain for volleyball as well as for life.
So Nicole, I'm going to have you in a single leg position. You're doing the same thing, hands on your pelvis. I want you to take your hips, tuck your butt under, find neutral, and you can just rep that for me. Allow it to arch where you go back, and then feel what it feels like to get aligned or to neutral.
This is a great core exercise, and will carry over again into walking as well as running and jumping.
All right, so same exercise, hands on your pelvis, tuck your hips and butt back under to find neutral. Just rep that.
You can really see on this one that she's recruiting muscles below her belly button, which are great for spinal stability and a hard thing to do on your own without some feedback from the resistance.
So Julie, Nicole started on her knees, and now she's come onto her feet. Why is this kind of progression important?
When you're on your knees, it's going to be easier. You're going to be able to gain control with a little bit. It's going to be easier to gain the control that you need. Once you throw in a longer lever arm here, there are a few more pieces that she has to control and still get that same motion with control. And so, great progression for building trunk control.
So Nicole, really now tilt back, find neutral, tuck your butt under. Rep that, please. Make sure you're breathing. All right, so Nicole, I want you to just go ahead and turn to your left. And you get to the end of the range, I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose, exhale, and turn to your left more. Deep breath in through your nose, exhale, turn. Deep breath in through your nose, exhale, turn. Go back to the beginning, face front. One more set, turn to your left, find the end range. Deep breath in through your nose, exhale, turn. Two more just like that. Face forwards.
So Julie, what's working here?
So she's a little bit locked up rotating to the left, and so the bands are giving her an assist into that, a gentle assist into that, while she's still having to work the stabilizing muscles of her spine and her pelvis. Since she's on the ball, she has to create a little bit more control through her pelvis. And then we're recruiting adductors here for some stability. It's a great way to unlock that thoracic spine for hitting.
All right, so Nicole, turn to your right and then just turn to your left. You're just doing 10 slow reps all the way, one continuous motion.
So how is a movement like this going to translate into the sport of volleyball?
So if you have functional mobility of the thoracic spine, you need this in order to be able to hit effectively and with more power. And it will also help to prevent shoulder injuries, because if you don't have this range of motion, and you're going to get it somewhere, and it's going to be by creating hypermobility problems at the shoulder.
Nicole, now take your face and head straight ahead and just turn your shoulders independent of your neck and head turning.
What's different about this instruction?
So we're separating the segment of the thoracic spine from cervical and to a certain degree lumbar. And so again, this is important for hitters, because you want to be able to keep your eye on the ball. And so she's getting the separation of motion between the different segments of her spine that she needs to be able to do that efficiently.
All right, so Nicole, if you would, you're going to squeeze that ball with your thighs, sit tall, find neutral, and if you would, I want you just to set to yourself. There you go.
So adding the setting component, what's happening now, Julie?
So she has the pull that she has to counteract with the small muscles of her spine and trunk and still maintain the ball in the air. And so this is gaining isometric control of the trunk and spinal muscles while she's doing an active activity.
All right, so Nicole, find a good foot position that you'd normally set in, whatever width you'd normally set, find a natural position, and I want you to do the same thing. Set the ball over your head to yourself.
You talked about dynamic core stability before, so what's happening here for the lay person to understand?
So it's dynamic, but it's also isometric. She's having to hold her trunk isometrically, and so the muscles of her trunk are working but not actually moving to counteract the force of the band that's pulling her into rotation. And so all the little rotators of her spine have to work in order to hold her spine in place and gain that stability, while then she can dynamically start working off of this stable base with the added component that she's standing, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult to have that control.
Find neutral with your hips and pelvis. And now I want your shoulders to turn a little bit to the right, let the band pull them, and then come back and just keep rotating back and forth with your shoulders as you're setting.
So what's this doing, Julie?
So for setters, you don't usually get a perfect pass, and so you have to be able to move in the air, and you have to be able to make adjustments in your trunk. And so this addition of the rotation here, she's having to gain more active control of those trunk muscles. They have to be able to work in an elongating fashion, also in a shortening fashion, for more control over that movement.
So Nicole, make some movements with your feet and body now as if the pass wasn't a great pass.
So she's moving around, Julie. I guess this is upping the difficulty of what she's doing?
Right.
In what way?
So we're now asking her body to make faster adjustments to the different positions, which is something that she's going to have to be doing functionally, and this will allow her to be able to do this in a game situation, for example. And she'll have more of the control over the ball with her arms if she's more stable and strong throughout her trunk.
So if she didn't have the resistance with the bands and the PC 360 harness, what's the worry? What's the default position that she might go to?
So without the control through here, she's going to be more predisposed to shoulder injuries. And also, as we were looking at earlier, she tends to have too much arch in her spine, and so that again is just a recipe for disaster with her back while she's playing. And so the movement piece will help her to have control of that in this situation and also when she's playing.
So find neutral with your pelvis and set for me.
So she's on one leg now, Julie, so what's happening here?
So that significantly increases the difficulty of it. She's having to really gain control over glute medius, lumbopelvic musculature has to be engaged here. And so she has to control this segment, and function efficiently up there. That's a difficult exercise. And very effective, because we all know setters don't always have a perfect two-footed stance.
Mm-hmm. You talked earlier about the endurance that has to be gained by the smaller muscles stabilizing the spine, shoulder. Why is the endurance important, and how is this addressing the endurance component?
So, usually in a playing environment, you do the motion and then you're done. But then you're doing it over a long period of time during the game, and so these muscles aren't necessarily going to get trained to have that endurance unless you specifically target that. And that's what this does. And also to point out, the single leg stance piece is great for prevention of ankle sprains.
So Nicole, you can stop. Tell us what you're feeling after doing that.
Shoulder is definitely working from setting. Core is activated, especially on one leg. It's working my leg a lot, and as well as my glute and my low back. So it's just really good for full body exercise, making sure that I'm stable and everything is activated as I'm setting.
So comparing this to any other different kind of workouts, right? How does it feel? How does it relate? How does it transfer?
Well, I really like it because it's something that you can progress, again, where you're starting with one part of your body with making sure that you're neutral, and then you can add in a volleyball to it and still do it in a lot of different positions. And so I kind of see it as, if I can do this with a band and a ball and on one leg, then I can perform out on the court, and it makes everything just easier, and I feel more prepared and stable.
So specifically, when you came back from your back injury, you did a bunch of these kinds of exercises with Billy.
Yep. So
how did it affect your return to play?
I felt a dramatic difference. I just felt like I had more control over my body, especially to when I started moving around, when I started static and then started moving around the court if the pass wasn't perfect. I could just feel everything was activated and on, where before I didn't feel that. So I felt a dramatic difference even from the first day that I got back on the court.
All right, so Nicole, I want you to find neutral with your pelvis. Take your hands off, hold that position, and I want you to do some slow controlled falls to both hands. Reset. Find neutral, hands off.
So Julie, can you walk us through what's happening here?
So this happens in volleyball. And what she's gaining with practicing this is learning how to hold that control in what's usually an uncontrolled situation, when you end up falling. And again, after back injury, these muscles have got to kick in before her hands hit the ground. And if they aren't trained, that is not going to happen automatically.
So continue, Nicole, but this time what I want you to do is drop and then rotate. You're going to hit both hands, and then you're going to roll right or roll left like you were digging. Find neutral first, to two hands, and then fall and turn. Good. Repeat, please. Find neutral.
What's the rolling component doing here, Julie?
So kind of taking it back to some of the rotational control exercises that she was doing, we want her trunk to rotate as a whole and in a more controlled fashion. rather than having, shoulders and thoracic spine and lumbar spine, pelvis, and hip all going different directions, because the more degrees of instability that you have with a fall and a roll, the more room for injury.
Nicole, this time, same thing, find neutral. When you fall, you're falling with your hands out because you're digging.
So now the movement starts to look more like volleyball. Why is that an important element in the training, Julie?
So when she's coming out to dig that ball, knowing that she and a lot of young women tend to have too much arch in their spine, she's able to control that now as her arms come out rather than go into that uncontrolled super lordotic position.
Nicole, tell us what you're feeling as you're doing this.
For me, adding the rolling to it just makes it more game-like, and so I have to focus. This is really nice. I can focus a lot more on what my core is doing while implementing a volleyball skill. So it's really helpful, again, as a progression to where I'm starting with just diving and then adding in what it might look like on the court. So it's just really good to make sure I'm stable in my core.
So why not do 100 sit-ups? Why not?
Well, first of all, it's bad for your back. Second of all, you're getting, primarily one major muscle group, which is important, but you need to have fine control over everything, and everything is specific to the task that you're doing. If you don't train for a specific task, it's not going to necessarily help you in that task. And so we're taking the strengthening components and then adding in the things that she's going to do in the court. It's all about repetition. She can do, 5 repetitions here, and maybe it'll translate onto the court. But if she does, 50 repetitions of something functional like this, then it'll be automated when she's out on the court. When that does happen, when she doesn't have time to think about it, it'll still happen for her.
I think to add on to that too is, especially with sit-ups or crunches or whatever, you're just working just the front muscle group. And even just doing this when I'm rolling in, just making sure I'm controlling and stable in my core, I can feel everything here pulling in. And so when I have that feeling of everything pulling from the sides, and it's not just your front 6 muscles right here, then I know that I'm getting stronger and it's going to help me out on the volleyball court.
So as an athlete, you've been through a lot of conditioning programs, done a lot of exercises. What do you feel, and you're starting to talk about it, but what do you feel is more different about training like this?
I just think it's the most applicable thing that you can do, and what I really like is there is a progression, and you are implementing one thing on top of the other, so there's steps, and it's not just not doing anything into doing a full motion or exercise. So I just like the progression part of it, and I can feel myself improving as I continue to do it.
Can you just speak to younger athletes now? Because remembering when you were a younger athlete, part of your mentality was, if it hurts, I can just go through it. Mm-hmm. And so what have you learned, and what advice do you have to younger athletes who might be thinking, well, if my back hurts, I've just got to kind of tough through that. If my shoulder hurts, I've just got to kind of go through that, or my knees hurt, I just got to go through that. What advice do you have? What perspective would you like to share with them?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I've learned is there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. And a lot of the time, if it can go both ways. If people are hurt, they say they're injured. If they're injured, they think they're hurt. And so I just think it's really important that if anything is bothering you, even if it's just a little bit, that you make sure that you're working on strengthening those muscles or ligaments, whatever it may be, to make sure that you don't actually injure yourself. So I think, if you're hurt and things are bugging you a little bit, it's just important to make sure that you're training those parts of your body that are bothering you to prevent injury. And then if you are injured, just to make sure you do take care of your body and give your body the rest time that it needs so you can come back to the court faster.
Julie, from a PT standpoint, if a player is training and they have pain in their shoulder, they have pain in their spine, they have pain in their knee, what kind of advice would you give players and parents of players But when something like that is being addressed or something that's being reported.
Right, and you know, so it's, the tendency is for people to try to play through things, and it's hard to know when that's okay and when it's not. General advice is, if you have pain and it's persistent and it's consistent whenever you do a particular motion, you probably have a muscle imbalance or something that could potentially cause you problems down the road. You should have it looked at so that you know what you're dealing with. First, you have to know what you're dealing with, and then you have to look at the things that predisposed you to that particular problem. And it's usually all about balance. Your muscles are not functioning a balanced way, or you're locked up elsewhere, which is then creating the need to have excessive mobility in the joint that's injured. Here she's working on keeping her feet moving. This is a progression of some of the exercises that she was doing. Trunk is stable, while she then challenges herself to position to get the most accurate set.
First of all, it's pretty tiring, which is good, because when I'm tired cardio-wise, then it makes me have to think more about making sure my core is turned on, which is really, really good. I like this drill a lot because it's more dynamic, very realistic in volleyball, and I'm still implementing everything we just did with Powercore and everything like that.
How that converts from in there to out here.
So it's about activating those muscles. It's about activating them and automating their use. So with the Powercore, she's not only learning how to find those muscles, but she's learning how to then activate them dynamically so that she can translate it into the sport.
Back in towards right antenna. Your left shoulder towards target.
So excited about all this stuff.
Stay tall. Warm up, what happens?
It's a good warm-up just because it's against resistance. So I'm having to work my core and all my muscles harder than I normally would when I'm hitting. So basically just activates them quickly and effectively so I'm hitting harder.
Cool. Specifically with a band on the hip, what do you feel?
It's harder to stay balanced and stable because you have a tendency to want to work into the band. And so the band is resisting the motion that I want to do, which is activating my core muscles.
So she's getting that lumbopelvic separation here, which she'll need to be able to control when she does these movements. So this is a great exercise to get everything that she needs, obliques, transverses, to be able to control that movement when she goes to bend. When she takes the band off, it'll probably feel like she's got a lot more power.
Okay. One of the questions I have, there's a lot of people that don't believe in rotating the spine and the pelvis. Speak to that, please.
Rotation is a functional movement. If you don't have rotation, and if you don't have enough rotation and in symmetrical rotation throughout your spine, something will break down. Rotation is an important thing to train. You need to have sufficient mobility, you need to have sufficient strength throughout your range of motion. And this type of exercise will train not just to get you more mobility, but it will also give you strength within that mobility. Activated now that the band is coming.
Yeah, well with the band on, you're fighting the resistance from it. So once I take it off, I just feel like my body's flying through it. So everything's turned on. I feel like I have more power and more control with where I'm hitting it. So it feels really good.
Now she's got resistance in her upper torso.
torso. So how is this different than what was happening with the hip harness?
So ideally now she has the control over her hips from the previous exercise. Now the resistance through her trunk is making her work harder to be able to get to this particular exercise.
With the band on again, you're fighting the resistance, so it's pulling you back. So when you're coming through the ball, at first it's a little bit tougher. However, you still make sure that you're doing the correct movement. So once the band comes off, again, just like how it felt with my hips, I feel like my shoulders and everything is flying through now. Hips first, and then once my hips are through, my shoulders are coming through as well.
So it's the sequence of events. We have to have first the trunk and pelvic control and rotation, and then we have to have the pelvic or the thoracic trunk and control rotation, and then we can get the most explosive movement of our shoulder without predisposing that shoulder to overuse injuries, which is so common as we know in volleyball players. And so if we can set the groundwork, we'll have fewer problems up here at this joint.
Let's just go over this again.
Can Nicole connected the shoulder harness to the hip harness?
Strength, power, mobility.
With the strap on, I felt more tension when I was pulling back to swing. So it just made me make sure that I was getting my shoulder back and open towards the ball when I'm hitting. Once I took it off, I was able to extend more through my thoracic spine, and it just helped me hit the ball harder and have my body in sequence.
So again, training rotational control, strap on. She's gonna have to open up through here, strap off. Hopefully we'll then have a sequence of events. This is gonna function, rotate backwards. This will follow greater power control on that shoulder. It's all about specificity of training. When you train what you're actually going to be doing on the court, you're gonna be much more efficient and much less prone to injury.